You wake up before the alarm. The room is still dark. For a few seconds, you do not remember what time it is, what day it is, or what you promised yourself the night before. Then you see the phone beside your bed. Last night, you made a decision. This morning would be different. You would rise when the alarm rang. You would begin the work before checking messages. You would not surrender another hour to a screen. You would keep one small promise, even if nobody knew you had made it. But your hand is already moving. The screen lights up. One notification becomes another. 5 minutes become 20. 20 become 40. And somewhere beneath the noise, a quiet thought appears. You did it again. Nobody forced you. No enemy entered the room. No one took away your freedom. The door was not locked. Your body was not restrained. You were free to choose. And yet, you did not feel free. This is how many of your most important battles are lost. Not with violence, not with witnesses, not in some dramatic moment when the whole world is watching. They are lost quietly. They are lost when anger tells you to speak and you obey. When comfort tells you to stay and you obey. When fear tells you to retreat and you obey. When distraction whispers that one more minute will not matter. The most dangerous commands in your life are often the ones nobody speaks aloud. Synthetic Voice by VB.VN. There is another opponent that follows you into every room. It speaks with your voice and turns exhaustion into an excuse, desire into necessity, and delay into something harmless. It only needs to win the next decision. This is not a video about becoming emotionless. This is not a video about punishing yourself. This is a video about discovering who is really making your decisions. Because self-control is not tested when the right choice feels easy. It is tested when every feeling inside you begins arguing for the opposite. You can reach goals, earn respect, build strength, and appear disciplined from the outside. But if one craving can change your direction, if one insult can control your tongue, if one uncomfortable morning can erase a promise you made the night before, then a harder question remains. How can you call yourself free when a feeling, a screen, a craving, or a moment of anger can command you? We will return to that dark room. Because the answer is hidden in the few silent seconds before your hand touches the phone. You already know more than you think. You know what late nights, scattered attention, quick anger, and broken promises do to you. Still, knowledge does not always change action. So you search for another book, video, routine, or system. You tell yourself that the correct method will finally make discipline easy. Synthetic Voice by VB.VN. But the problem is rarely that you do not know what to do. The problem begins when what you know meets what you feel. Aristotle had a word for this conflict: akrasia. It means weakness of will, the condition of acting against your own better judgment. You know the action will harm you. You know another choice would serve you better. You even want to choose wisely. Then the moment arrives. Comfort becomes more persuasive than reason. Desire becomes louder than memory. Anger becomes more convincing than patience. And you hear yourself say the same sentence again. I knew better, but I did it anyway. Picture a woman sitting alone after receiving a message that feels insulting. The words are short, but they strike something deep. Her face becomes warm. Her breathing changes. In seconds, her mind begins building a case. She types a response, stops, and places the phone down. A quieter voice tells her to wait. Then she picks it up again, sharpens every sentence, and presses send. For a few seconds, she feels powerful. When the anger fades, the message remains. What felt like strength begins to look like surrender. Here is the part most people miss. Losing control often feels like taking control. Anger tells you that speaking immediately is courage. Fear tells you that retreating is wisdom. Voice generated by VB.VN. Comfort tells you that delay is recovery. Desire tells you that one exception will not matter. The impulse rarely introduces itself as an enemy. It arrives wearing the language of reason. That is why the inner war is so difficult. The voice knows how to borrow your intelligence. It takes pain, fatigue, history, and excuses, then builds an argument that feels justified. You do not say, I am choosing weakness. You say, I deserve a break. You do not say, I am avoiding responsibility. You say, I will begin when I feel ready. Your feelings make the decision, and your mind defends it. This is also why motivation cannot be trusted as a permanent guide. Motivation is powerful while something is new. Then the alarm rings on a cold morning. The work becomes repetitive, nobody notices, and the reward remains far away. Motivation quietly leaves. If action depends on inspiration, your mood becomes your master. You work when you feel powerful and stop when you feel tired. This is why so many lives are built in short bursts, followed by silence. Voice generated by VB.VN. Picture someone who has been promising to change for years. Every Sunday night, he promises that Monday will be different. Then Monday arrives. He silences the alarm, misses one workout, and moves the beginning to tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes next Monday becomes next month. The deepest damage is not the missed workout. His own voice stops carrying authority. When he says, "I will do it tomorrow," another part of him already knows the words are empty. He no longer believes his own promises. And once you stop trusting yourself, even simple goals begin to feel heavy. A quiet witness inside you has been keeping a record. Every broken promise becomes evidence. Not that you are permanently weak, but that your words have not yet become instructions you follow. What happens when your own promises no longer carry authority inside your mind? You begin to depend on pressure from outside. A deadline, watcher, crisis, or painful consequence must force you. Without those pressures, you drift toward what is easiest. You appear free because no one is controlling you, but without an external command, you cannot command yourself. If you have ever known exactly what you needed to do and still watched yourself choose the opposite, then you already understand this war. It is not rare, it is not a flaw that belongs only to you. But it becomes dangerous when you stop questioning who is making the final decision. If this kind of conversation helps you see your own patterns more clearly, consider subscribing. And in the comments, write one promise to yourself that you are tired of breaking. Long before modern habit systems and productivity advice, philosophers understood this conflict. One of them began life with almost no freedom in the ordinary sense. Another possessed more earthly power than nearly anyone alive. The first was born a slave. The second ruled an empire. Yet both came to the same disturbing conclusion. A person can control almost nothing outside himself and still possess inner freedom. And a person can command the world while remaining a servant to his own reactions. Epictetus began life without the kind of freedom most people spend their lives trying to protect. He was born into slavery. The world around him could limit his movement, comfort, and future. Yet he became one of the clearest voices on freedom the ancient world ever produced because he understood that there is more than one kind of slavery. Synthetic voice by VB.VN. There are chains placed on the body, and chains accepted by the mind. A person may be able to travel anywhere, buy anything, speak openly, and make countless choices, yet still be controlled by fear, appetite, anger, and the need for approval. Another person may have little power over circumstances, yet refuse to surrender the right to choose what those circumstances will mean. For Epictetus, that inner faculty of choice was called prohairesis. It is a Greek word for the part of you that judges, accepts, refuses, and decides. It cannot control whether, other people, fairness, reward, or loss. But it can decide whether an insult becomes rage, fear becomes retreat, or desire becomes obedience. This inner territory is smaller than the world you want to control. But it is the only territory from which a free life can begin. But it runs deeper than that. You do not lose freedom only when another person gives you an order. You also lose freedom when an impulse appears and you no longer possess the ability to refuse it. A man may travel anywhere yet cannot sit alone for 10 minutes without reaching for a screen. A woman may say anything yet cannot remain silent when anger demands a reply. Another person may receive praise from thousands and collapse under one stranger's disapproval. No prison walls surround them, yet something inside is giving commands. If a craving can make you act against your judgment, who is the master? Synthetic voice by VB.VN.
If fear can change your values in a single moment, who is in control? If the opinion of another person can determine your peace, where does your freedom actually live? The answer is not that you must become cold, The answer is not that you must stop wanting, the answer is that no feeling should be granted authority, simply because it is intense. An impulse can be loud and still be wrong. A fear can be powerful and still be misleading. A desire can feel urgent and still make your life smaller. This was also the private struggle of one of the most powerful men in the world. Marcus Aurelius ruled the Roman Empire. His decisions affected armies, cities, laws, and millions of lives. He lived under the pressure of war, disease, political danger, betrayal, and personal grief. From the outside, he possessed a level of authority that almost no one could imagine. But in private, he kept returning to the same task. He had to govern himself. His personal writings were not the words of a man who had defeated anger forever. They were reminders written by a man who knew anger would return. They were not proof that he never felt resentment. They were evidence that resentment had to be challenged again and again. He reminded himself to rise, to treat difficult people as human, and to remember that praise and criticism were temporary. Power over an empire did not remove fatigue, pride, frustration, or grief. The emperor still woke up inside a human mind. Picture him at the end of a long day. Military reports have arrived. Decisions remain unresolved. People have disappointed him. His body is tired. He can command soldiers, but no army can stop a resentful thought. No law can prevent grief. No servant can choose wisely for him when irritation speaks. That battle remains his. What does it mean to rule an empire if you cannot rule your next reaction? This is why Marcus wrote to himself. Not to impress an audience, not to build a reputation as a philosopher. He wrote because a person can occupy the highest position in society and still be dragged downward by the smallest impulse. Status does not create self-command. Intelligence does not create self-command. Good intentions do not create self-command. Self-command must be practiced in the moment when another choice feels easier. Sit with that for a second. The battles that shape your character rarely look heroic. They happen before you send the message. They happen when the alarm rings and the room is cold. They happen when you are tired, irritated, unseen, and certain that one exception will not matter. They happen when you could lie and probably never be caught. They happen when nobody would know whether you kept your promise. The world celebrates visible victories, but each is built from private decisions that seemed insignificant. The work completed when distraction was available. The angry sentence never sent. The habit interrupted before it consumed another evening. These moments often feel like discomfort, not triumph. That is why they are easy to underestimate. Self-control is not usually a dramatic act of domination over yourself. It is the quiet refusal to let the strongest feeling in the room become the final authority. The Stoics were not asking you to destroy emotion. They were asking you to stop confusing emotion with command. You can feel anger without becoming cruel. You can feel fear without abandoning what matters. You can feel desire without giving it everything it asks for. You can feel exhausted and still keep one small promise. The goal is not to become a stone. A stone cannot feel temptation, but it cannot choose courage. Self-mastery exists because conflict exists, because obedience and refusal are both possible. Without desire, there is no discipline, only absence of temptation. The weaker part of you is not an enemy that must be hated, it is a force that must be recognized. It may speak through fatigue, pride, loneliness, or the desire to escape. You do not have to silence it, you only have to stop handing it the final decision. Epictetus began with almost no control over his outer life. Marcus Aurelius possessed more external control than most people could ever hold. Yet both arrived at the same point. Freedom is not measured only by what the world allows you to do. It is measured by whether your judgment can survive contact with your impulses. The slave can protect an inner choice. The emperor can lose one. And every day, in moments too small for history to record, you face the same test. Not whether you feel temptation, not whether anger appears, not whether fear speaks, but whether the first voice inside you is automatically permitted to become the last. Most people imagine discipline as a form of punishment. They picture cold mornings, rigid schedules, denied pleasures, and a life reduced to rules. When discipline hurts, they assume something has gone wrong. But discipline is not hatred directed at the person you are. It is loyalty to the person you have decided to become. Punishment says you are weak and must be crushed. Discipline says your future matters too much to be abandoned for one temporary feeling. You wake early because you made a promise. You remain silent because a passing emotion should not create a permanent consequence. You resist the desires that ask you to trade freedom for a moment of relief. Now here is where it gets uncomfortable. Most of the time, you are not defeated by an impulse because it is impossible to resist. You are defeated because you accept its first demand as a final command. A feeling appears. Do it now. Avoid this. Say the words. Open the screen. Stay in bed. Leave the work for later.
And almost immediately, the mind produces another sentence. I have no choice. But that sentence is rarely true. Between the impulse and the action, there is a small space. It may last 5 seconds or less. It may feel like tension in your chest or restlessness in your hands. But the space is there, and something remains undecided. The ancient Greeks used the word enkrateia. Self-mastery. Power over oneself. It does not mean the desire disappears. It means the desire is present, but it no longer owns the final vote. Anger still rises. Fear still speaks. Comfort still makes its offer. But none of them automatically becomes action. That is the beginning of inner authority. Return to the dark room. You wake before the alarm. The air is cold. The world outside is silent. Your phone is within reach. Nobody is watching. There is no punishment, applause, audience, camera, or visible reward. Only a few seconds in which two versions of you seem to exist at the same time. One wants immediate comfort. The other remembers the promise. One says that 5 more minutes will not matter. The other knows that this is exactly how entire mornings disappear. One says that you deserve relief. The other asks whether relief is what you truly need. Experience AI voice technology at vb.vn. This does not look like a battle. There is no sound. No dramatic movement. No enemy standing across from you. But in that moment, your character is waiting for an answer. You do not become disciplined only when you complete a difficult goal. You become disciplined when your decision survives contact with discomfort. You become disciplined when the choice you made in clarity is not erased by the feeling that arrives later. Notice what just happened. The battle was never truly between you and the phone. The phone was only the object. The deeper conflict was between two meanings of freedom. The first says freedom means doing whatever you feel like doing. No restrictions. No resistance. No one telling you what to do. It sounds liberating. But a person who must obey every feeling is not free. They are governed by whatever emotion happens to be strongest. The second meaning is quieter. Freedom means you are not forced to obey every desire that enters your mind. You can feel something without serving it. You can want something without taking it. You can hear an impulse without turning it into action. This brings us back to the question from the beginning. How can you call yourself free when a feeling, a screen, a craving, or a moment of anger can command you? Experience AI voice technology at vb.vn. You cannot. Not fully. Freedom is not simply the absence of someone standing over you. It is the presence of something within you that can say no. Freedom is not the ability to do everything you feel like doing. It is the ability to refuse what would make you less than the person you have chosen to become. You will not win every time. You will still reach for the screen, speak too quickly, or abandon a promise. Self-mastery is not perfection. It is recovery. It is seeing failure without turning it into an identity. You do not have to say, I failed because I am weak. You can say, I failed because I surrendered the decision too early. That gives you something you can change. The next time anger rises, wait 1 minute longer. When comfort argues, keep one small promise. When fear tells you to retreat, take one more step before deciding. Each pause interrupts the old chain. Impulse. Obedience. Regret. The pause creates another possibility. Impulse. Awareness. Choice. You do not need to destroy the weaker voice inside you. It may become louder when you are tired, lonely, afraid, or uncertain. The goal is not to silence it forever. The goal is to stop placing it on the throne. Your impulses, emotions, and desires can make their case. But the final judgment must belong to your values, your direction, and your word. That is the strange piece hidden inside discipline. You stop fighting to feel perfect before you act. You stop waiting for desire and duty to agree. You stop believing that discomfort means you are on the wrong path. Sometimes discomfort is simply the feeling of an old command being refused. vb.vn, Vietnam's leading text-to-speech solution. And in that refusal, however small, you begin to return to yourself. If this idea has reached you at the right time, consider subscribing and returning for the next conversation. Not because one video can change your life, but because the questions you return to eventually shape the choices you make. So what does this war within ask of you? Not perfection. Not a life without desire, anger, fear, or weakness. It asks you to recognize the moment when a feeling tries to become an order. And to remember that you still have a vote. There are 3 lessons to carry with you. First, your impulses are experiences, not commands. A feeling can be intense without being wise. A craving can feel urgent without being necessary. A thought can enter your mind without deserving a place in your actions. You do not control every emotion that rises, but none of them automatically owns the final decision. Second, every promise you keep restores authority to your own voice. You do not build self-trust by making larger promises. You build it by keeping smaller ones. Get out of bed when you said you would. Work for 20 minutes before opening the screen. Wait before sending the message. Stop one excuse before it becomes an entire day. VB.VN, Vietnam's leading text-to-speech solution. Each decision seems small, but your mind is watching. Every time your actions agree with your words, you teach yourself that your commitments matter. Every time you keep a promise in private, you become less dependent on pressure, praise, fear, or punishment from outside. Third, the person you become is the voice you obey when nobody is watching. Anyone can appear disciplined when reward and consequence are visible. The deeper test arrives when the room is quiet, the choice is private, and no one will ever know what you decided. That is where character is formed. Not in one final victory. Not in a single heroic act. But in the repeated decision to let your values speak after your impulses have finished shouting. So ask yourself one question. What is one private battle you know you need to stop losing? Maybe it is the first hour of your morning. Maybe it is the anger you keep defending. Maybe it is the promise you have repeated so many times that even you no longer believe it. Write it in the comments, not as a public performance, but as a clear admission of where the battle is taking place. The world may continue to test your patience. People may disappoint you. Fear may return. Comfort may keep making the same offer. You cannot silence every voice inside you. But you can decide which one receives your obedience. Because in the end, the world may never stop trying to command you. The final answer can still be yours. Text-to-speech platform by VB.VN.